Howdy, folks. Welcome to another episode of the DevOps Diaries podcast. Today, I am joined by Aga Peryie. Aga, hi, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jack. Thanks for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure and my delight. And Aga, this is a really special moment because you are the first product manager from Gearset that I've had on the podcast. So, a very privileged position to be in, and I thank you for your time.
Oh, thanks for trusting me with this. No
Yeah, I've got
pressure.
absolutely no pressure, no pressure whatsoever. Let's set that aside, set that aside right now. I've given the listeners a little bit of a spoiler. You're a product manager here at Gearset, but why don't you tell the listeners in your own words a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm a senior product manager at Gearset. I look after three of our products. I look after our backup, archiving, and sandbox seeding. And they are all data related. So it is quite a nice fit, taking some of my experience. So yeah, I've been doing product management now for going on to 7 years. And yeah, I managed different products in the past, some software for silicon companies. Once in the past, I also worked for a company called Upcom. It's a life sciences company, but I managed data. And that's why I say like it's quite an interesting fit for me because I manage both software and data, and now I manage software that handles data. So I really like how all of my experience from my previous roles got me here right now and got me ready for the role at Gearset.
Absolutely, and data, as we should all hopefully know, if we're in the Salesforce ecosystem and listening to this podcast, data is super important. So we're lucky to have somebody like yourself with all that experience looking after one of the most critical parts of the platform and critical parts of a lot of folks' DevOps practices. You mentioned a bunch of product management experience. What's your take and what's your ethos approach when it comes to product management and designing good solutions for people?
Yeah, sure. So I got into product management from a support role. So I did customer support before product management, and I definitely brought that experience with me into my approach to product. So I always care about our customers and their needs and any problems that we can solve for them. And this is why I really feel at home at Gearset, because at Gearset we care so much about the job to be done. So, we always ask questions, why? Like how would this thing that you're asking us for would help you? What problems would it solve you? And I think this is like a very good approach. So I've worked in different places, and sometimes I've worked in companies where we had to care about single customers' needs. So there would be like a big customer, and what they asked, we did. But sometimes you'd end up in a situation where customer A would ask for a feature, and we'd deliver it. And then customer B would say, "Oh, what does it do? How can I use it?" And we wouldn't have a good answer for them because we just delivered it because someone asked. But here at Gearset, we don't do things this way. We solve problems. So instead of delivering features for a customer, we solve problems for all of our customers. And it's an approach I really believe in. And thanks to, like I had an opportunity earlier this year to take part in training with Bob Mosta, around jobs to be done. And I definitely think like it helped me maybe get the right wording around what I always believed in, but didn't really have the right words to describe. And yeah, the question, the always asking questions why, and going into that, like, what are we solving and how can you use it? How much time will it save you? What difference it will make to you and your business, to your teams? And it can go beyond just monetary value. It might be like it saves my team time so they can go home on time, right? Or, they might be able to focus on some training and some personal development because they don't have to spend so much time doing something else. The impact can be anything really, and I really like that here at Gear, so we definitely focus on that.
Yeah, for sure. I think anything, and you're speaking to my directly to my heart because impact for me is about how it improves like a human experience. Like you say, like going home on time. Everybody wants to go home on time. Nobody wants to be for things to go wrong and to be at 2 a.m. at the desk scrambling or any of these other things, or it allows them to leave the office and do something that they're interested in, or like you say, learn a new thing. Obviously, the Salesforce platform being so vast, there is so much that people can delve into, and if we're making people's lives easier, then they have the opportunity to do that. Obviously, obviously one of the core proponents of the job to be done framework. You mentioned Bob Meister as well, being the father of this framework to some extent. What do you find? And I think many folks in Salesforce admin, developer, architect roles will wonder this. How receptive generally are folks when you ask why? Because often people, like why? You sound a little bit like a toddler, you know.
Yeah.
So, what's kind of the reception to when you're asking customers why do you want to do this? What's the impact and all this kind of stuff that it's not something typically that I think a lot of people can be afraid of. Like what's kind of the response and how do you kind of overcome that? I don't know, maybe skepticism that comes from a user or a customer when you're
hmm
asking them all these questions.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It definitely depends on the customer. You get these very chatty customers that love to answer questions and go into great detail about like why they need something. And they might be very close to the problem itself, or they've had some experiences in the past. Backup is a good example. Backup for a lot of customers is like a tick box. When I ask them, why do you need it? They'll say, because my manager, my, IT director, my compliance, team told me to do it, right? And the why is very limited. They don't really see the value of it. But then I'll speak to some customers who, experienced a data loss in the past. And they'll be like, oh, we need it because 2 years back we had this problem, or I had this problem in another company I worked in. It took us days, weeks to get our data back. Some of it we never retrieved again. And this is why I really believe we need a good backup solution. So it really depends who you're speaking to. And then I think it's nice because as you ask questions, even the customers that kind of think I'm just doing it because someone told me to, when you actually delve into, okay, well, how do you know when something goes wrong when you in your org? Like, how do you find out when something breaks? And then how do you fix it? Then they start thinking about what actually your solution might mean to them. And then they start coming up with answers. So it's not always just why. You might need to ask it in a bit different way. You might need to ask them like, how do you manage it at the moment? How would you restore data right now? What steps would you take? And you still have some customers that, are not very chatty and they just don't want to give you answers. And sometimes we just have to accept that this is just not the person I need to speak to right now. And that's okay. And you get what you can take from that conversation and you move on to someone else. It's important to just like not try and like keep pushing it because we don't want to, give the customer a bad experience either, right? If they don't have the time right now to talk to us, that's okay. But yeah, I think it's just asking different questions and trying sometimes to paint a picture for them so maybe they can relate to what you're asking about a bit better, even when initially they thought this has nothing to do with me. You know?
Yeah, yeah. That storytelling and painting a picture can be really helpful for sure. What typically is the so you some of the questions that you posed there are really interesting, and I want to get into data backup specifically. Obviously, a huge part of the DevOps lifecycle. But what tends to be the common answers to a Salesforce customer that doesn't have a backup solution? What typically would they do when it came to restore time? So, what would be the typical answer to what do you do if you need to restore data or if you suffer a data loss instance? Where do generally people sit if they don't already have a solution?
So some customers say, oh, it goes to my trash can, right? And then, that's not a great answer. That's when you start to worry a bit and you're like, okay, how do I, delicately explain how this is just not good enough? Um, some people still do something. I think that's the nice thing. That's the good thing. Like, most customers know they should be doing something. It just depends what level it is. So when I say something, for example, they might be taking a manual export of data. So we're talking CSV files, right? Saving some data in CSV files, sometimes once a month. Again, manual process, so it takes longer. But they're doing something. They're trying to, protect their org in some way or form. Um, they might be using some different solutions. Often it's like they think they have a backup, or like they'll say, oh, doesn't Salesforce offer a backup? Like, do we not get it like as part of our, just overall Salesforce package? And this is when you just you realize you kind of think that there will be something in place, right? If it gets deleted, Salesforce will help me, right? And they might do with some things for sure. But yeah, having a dedicated backup solution in place, one that understands Salesforce, metadata and data is so important. And that's when this is an opportunity for us to educate our customers and say, yes, it will help you with some things. CSV files will protect you to a certain level, but restoring, that's where it gets tricky. So backup has two sides to it. One is saving the data somewhere where you can access it and, where in case of a disaster, it's there. But the restoration, that's where it really, you kind of, when you compare the solutions, you realize which is a good solution and which is like an okay solution. Because when you can't restore easily and quickly, then you run into problems.
Yeah, it's a solution is only good as your ability to restore from that solution, right?
Yeah,
And then what the next step for people that are doing manual exports is CSV data loader and then crying into their cornflakes.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and it takes hours, right? And this is when we talk about like, when we talked about what our solution does for customers and, letting them go home on time and things like that. Yeah, you don't want to spend a few weeks, working extra hours trying to restore data. It would be nice if you could do it within your working day and get it running before you leave at the end of the day home, right? That's what makes a difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, what would be your advice to a Salesforce customer that doesn't have a backup and recovery solution in place, or even any real defined process for disaster recovery? Where do you start?
Um, I'd say starting with almost like a tiny bit of an audit, like think about what data is really important to you. So before you start speaking budgets with your teams, right, and kind of trying to secure basically like a business case for why you need to pay someone for a solution, think about like what's important and what would be the impact if anything happened to that data today, right? If and it doesn't have to be when we speak disaster, we don't always say, fire in a server or a malicious entity deleting data. Sometimes it's literally a user error. Like we're all human, we make mistakes, right?
Yeah,
So it's like, how would you handle it today? How long would it take you to restore your data? How much data could you lose? Like, the bigger the organization, the more users, Salesforce users you have constantly typing in fields, adding new records and things like that. How much is this data worth to you? And, how much would it take you to recreate it if you needed to, right? Um, and that helps you kind of understand like the impact of not having a solution in place. And that then, like I said, like then think about what's the most important. So, for a lot of customers, it will be like your contact information, right? Contact accounts, anything that like, someone has spent time with you, giving you all of their details, right? Their addresses, email addresses, phone numbers, their use case, the products they want, and then it's gone and you have to recreate it. Like it's not a great customer experience for your customers if they have to give you all of this data again. It breaks that trust. So that's another thing to think about is like how important is your customers' trust to you, because that what you lose the moment the data is affected. Um, and then things like even the fact that like data right now is so important. I mean, we live in a world where data is basically money, with AI, right? Like AI needs data, AI feeds on data. So it's like you want to protect it even more because the better data you have, the more complete data you have, the better experience you can offer your customers as well.
yeah. The thing that you mentioned there about trust and organizations losing trust. It's the hardest thing to build, and it can be lost instantly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, previously you spoke about monetary value of things that's almost secondary, I think, when it comes to backup and recovery solutions. If there's been an incident, like you can spend 5 years building a business and have one data loss incident, and then all that trust goes down the drain, and customers may never come back, or they tentatively there until they find something better.
100%. Yeah. And we've seen it happen, right? And it's always shocking when it's a big corporation that suddenly you see that they had a huge data loss and you ask yourself, like, why didn't they have backup solution in place, right? Because like for me, this is my bread and butter. I live this every day, so I always wonder like why. But again, like you need someone to understand that this can happen to anyone, right? This can hit anyone, and yeah, data is so vulnerable in a way because it can be very easily overwritten. It can be very easily deleted, and it's so hard to recreate it.
Yeah. And you mentioned it's not always a malicious attack. Sometimes it's user error. It might be maybe an integration that's gone a little bit funky, and it happens, right?
Yeah.
That can kind of corrupt your data. Are there any other common ones that folks should be looking out for? Ways that data can be unintentionally manipulated, lost, or otherwise corrupted?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from, like the development side, maybe, you have, changes. If you delete a field, right, by accident, that deletes all the data in the field. And you might be able to bring the field back, but the data is gone. The same thing can happen if you change the type of the field or you change some, pick list and things, right? Like there is an option that while you're changing things, you might be overwriting data, not being able to bring it back. Um, it's honestly, it can be from even from user perspective, when they're going quickly and I know deleting data in Salesforce is not always as easy, but overwriting definitely is. Managed package is something we've heard a lot, right? Like that integration when there's a third party thing running on your org. An example I really remember is a customer of ours told us that they had a problem and suddenly there was like it was a different thing. So instead of data being deleted or manipulated, they actually had too much data being created suddenly by a managed package. And they noticed it because of backup, because they saw there was like a sudden spike in their volumes. Um, but they only got notified by the managed package provider like 2 weeks later, because it took them 2 weeks to figure out that something that they released into the world was broken, right? Sometimes it takes time. And without a good solution in place, they wouldn't notice, and then you have this whole mess to deal with. So yeah, it can honestly be anything. It can be an admin error, it could be a dev error, but it can also be end user error or a third party error that you just can't always prepare for.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of really interesting points there as well. So you mentioned for that in that particular instance, it was 2 weeks before the managed package provider let them know that there was an issue. What's the benchmark for finding issues of data loss? I think that's one of the things that people maybe don't think about. It's just like what's acceptable in terms of when we know that there's been some kind of data gone wrong incident
Yeah.
versus how long it takes to fix it, which we've already touched on. What's kind of best practices for how long it should take you to identify issues and how long it should take to restore to a normal working state?
I definitely think it would be great if you could find out within a day that something is happening. That's what I would call unusual. But what we find when I speak to our customers and I ask that question is like, how do you know when when something wrong happened, right? Either the data was corrupted or something got deleted. Most time they'll say a user will tell me, right? So if you are waiting for your users to tell you something is wrong, something's not working quite right, some data is missing, sometimes it might be weeks after the change happened that caused it, right? And it might take you so long to figure out which release, which PR could have caused this, right? And we can there's of course, the reason it sometimes happens in production and didn't happen in your, test environments is often because, maybe your test environment isn't so up to date and it didn't get picked up in your testing, right? There's a lot of things that can affect it. Um, and also from experience, I know, you might test things as much as you want, but the moment they hit production, it's always different. But if you're relying on your users to tell you when something breaks, there will always be a delay. And also, it's a bad experience, right? If you have your sales team being like, I need this right now, I'm on a call with a customer and this thing isn't working, right? It will be much better if you can fix it before it even affects them, before they even notice. I think that's where you want to get to. And that's when things like smart alerts and any kind of alerting notification, features can be very helpful, where you set some threshold of like, let me know when this change occurs, when more than 1,000 records get changed. If on a daily basis you get 100, right? depending on the scale of your organization. And it can help you stay on top of what's happening in your org, understanding what's normal, what's unusual, and then knowing that if a change goes live, that it has that impact, whether it by something that a mistake someone made on the team, or a managed package got released and or updated and it's causing havoc in your org. You'll know before, hopefully before your users know, and then you can fix it before it affects anyone.
Yeah, and it comes back to the trust thing that we've already mentioned. You have internal trust that you need to keep and hold
Yes,
as well, and that's one of the things that I'm quite passionate about when it comes to the DevOps lifecycle and Salesforce teams providing a good experience for their users and identifying issues before a user even hits it. They have trust in the team that the systems are going to work, and you build a better relationship and you can build better features and functionality, secure in the knowledge that they trust you and that things, if they do go wrong, it happens very infrequently. And when they do go wrong, it's fixed quickly too. Um, you know,
that's right. Yeah, the how quickly you can fix it. Again, when we said, a good backup is a good restore, is that second part of that story is like how quickly can you get things back up and running again?
yeah. And you mentioned something interesting about the data loss in itself. Something, we have a lot of busy admins and developers in this ecosystem, and, they might be doing clean up in their orgs. I still hear stories of folks having maxed out their number of fields that they have on like contact or opportunity or account or whatever else it might be. They're doing cleanup and they go and delete a few fields for as part of this cleanup operation, and boom, there goes all your data with it, right? These things happen. We can't avoid these things happening.
Yeah, exactly. And and it's very normal, right? Because every day you have your sales team being like, I need this field because I need somewhere to put this information. And yeah, like you said before, you know what, you run out of the fields and you have to clean them up. So having backup, again, backup is good for disasters and restoring in case of an emergency, but it's also good for keeping an audit of what used to be maybe in a field that you do want to delete. So, if an admin needs to delete some fields, at least this way you can kind of keep track of what was in them before that deletion. So if you ever need to go back, you just can see in the backup, like, oh, okay, we used to have this field and that was the data that was in there. So definitely like that's another use case, another job to be done with a backup, right? Is keeping track and kind of that historical record of things that are changing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned at the start of the podcast another area very like adjacent to backup itself, which is under your stewardship, is archiving. So you
That's
have a
right.
load of data and you're going to run out of space for it at some point. That's a very common thing that we hear as well. Tell me a little bit about archiving and some typical archiving strategies or situations that folks find themselves in sooner rather than later when it comes to their Salesforce data storage limits.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the limits exactly is the one we hear the most, right? Is especially with orgs, that have like been running for 20 years, right? How much data is in there? And what we find is like a lot of folks basically get to a point where their org is pretty much like almost like bloated with too much data. And it can be data that is, a bit stale. What we call stale, it means just basically that it's no longer needed. It might be records that, are a few years old that you keep for compliance, right? So when you think backup, it's very often compliance, and archiving can help with that as well, because you might need to keep some records for compliance sake, but actually you don't necessarily need them in your org, because you probably won't look at them unless someone asks you to. And archiving helps almost like depload your org, right? Like it like removes that extra weight. I laugh. It's almost like Rennie for your org. It will make it feel all better. It will run smoother. It will feel happier basically. Because when you have too much data in your org, it also makes it more difficult for your users. So if you're opening a record and you have to keep scrolling through pages of fields and information and related records, right? And hundreds of cases on an account and things like that, it can be difficult to find the thing you need in the moment when you need it. Archiving helps you like remove that extra weight, put it in, an archive. And some solutions, including our own, make it very easily then for you to kind of bring that surface that information back in Salesforce, so you can still see it, but it's not overloading your main view, it's not slowing down the performance of your org. And the nicest thing of all, like it removes some of the storage limitations. So you can go under your limit. Maybe you can even lower your limits and pay a bit less for storage if you want to.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of advantages to it. Yeah.
yeah. You mentioned a good solution there, like searchability and being able to find this stuff when you actually need it is critical. I don't know about you, but Salesforce can sometimes not be the most easily navigatable and searchable
Oh,
things for
goodness.
stuff that's in there in the first place.
Definitely. Exactly. And that's why when you remove things that could potentially, overcrowd your search results is so nice. Yeah, make it easier for reports to run, right? Because they have less data kind of to process to give you the information you need. Yeah, that's definitely good. And also AI, right? So we're speaking about AI. We have this whole agentic future ahead of us, right? It's happening already, and folks are like trying to implement it more and more. But we all know agents need good data. But sometimes you can't get rid of the bad data, what I would call, because, for compliance, you have to keep it, right? When you move it to an archive, you remove it from your agents so they don't get confused by it, they don't hallucinate because of it, and they can focus on data they need to help your users or, your customers, um, and you still stay compliant. Yeah.
That's such a great nugget of wisdom, and that's something that I hadn't considered for this agentic future. I think that a lot of people probably needed to hear that, get rid of that. So a lot of folks are facing pressures to implement agent force solutions or agentic solutions in their businesses, and what's a one surefire way that you can do that? Like archive the bad stuff, so it's not hallucinating. And a lot of this comes down to customer experience, user experience, the overall experience, and just how imperative good data, well managed data, comes into the rest of it. Is there anything that you notice for customers? Is it, or no, I guess the question is there anything? Is there a common theme for folks, Salesforce customers that have a data backup solution, archiving solution, and manage that in a great way? Sub benefits, you would say, to aside from being compliant and aside from reducing their storage limits and having more space in their orgs, less bloated orgs, any side benefits to how well the rest of their processes and Salesforce delivery runs?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's some side jobs definitely to both solutions. Um, Something I already mentioned with backup is kind of keeping an eye on changes in your org. So like how your data changes on a day-to-day basis, what the normal number of changes is. With archiving as well, it kind of helps you. I feel like helps you understand better the data that you have in your org. It's something that the folks we work with on a daily basis not maybe don't think about that much. We focus so heavily on the metadata side of things, on, comparing and deploying changes, right? That the data sometimes gets forgotten and kind of helps bring it to the forefront of their mind. But something we're trying to kind of help our customers with these days is also to see the benefit of running backups, just before you deploy, right? So we spoke about uh, the negative impact that some changes can have on production, and then kind of how to restore from it. And then there's the question of like, well, how much data are you willing to potentially lose? We know some customers get quite nervous before clicking that, release button, right? Especially when you have multiple changes going into production, and you're like, I'm not really fully sure what the impact might be, and because maybe you have like a really big team, and there's a lot that could go wrong. Like we're trying, from metadata perspective, our Gearset solution is really good. It will tell you if there's any conflicts and things like that, but there's still that data impact that could happen. And this is where we say, well, run a backup just before you deploy, right? Like do that like extra step where you can feel even more confident. So there's that confidence boosting capacity, like basic capability in backup where, hopefully you and your teams can feel a bit more at ease about trying new things, about deploying more changes, being a bit more agile, being a bit more creative. Because when you're so afraid that something might break in production all the time, when that's something that's causing you anxiety, you might be a bit, how to say, not necessarily like slower, but maybe conscious of the changes you're making, and take less risks. And I know, working with engineers on a daily basis, it's really nice when you can kind of give them a bit of freedom to try and experiment new things. And the way they can do it is when you show them the value of a backup in place. That the fact that, like, don't worry, even if something breaks, like, we've got you and we can quickly fix it, and the team will be fine, and the users will be okay, and the business will keep running. But maybe we can try this new solution. And it's definitely not that we're encouraging people to break things, but this is just like, look, it's going to be okay no matter what. Um, so that's probably like a side benefit that, like, we definitely believe in at Gearset, on how backup can support. Basically this kind of leads into like what we call the DevOps life cycle, right? It's a concept that a lot of folks know, DevOps life cycle, how you constantly can, build and deliver and, and then kind of observe, right? And kind of build and release again. And backup definitely supports all of these activities really well. And archiving, because it keeps your org quite lean and running smoother again, it helps to make sure that, like, you don't have to worry about some legacy data that might break when you release a new flow or something like that. Yeah.
That that's so that's so powerful. I really love what you said when you said, "Don't worry, we've got you." That's that's such a good feeling to be able to say and support a team in that way. And to your point as well, we think a lot in DevOps about, okay, do we have a rollback strategy? And a rollback strategy is all well and good for your metadata and making sure that you can revert to the previous version, and that's what people think about a lot of the time in typical software development, or maybe having a way to hotfix. But this thing that is so important, data, is still still like a side thought or a secondary thought to all of the other processes that we have going on. And I think this conversation is really important for continuing to bring it to the forefront when there is a lot of scary stories out there, especially now in the data realm.
Yes, definitely. We want to make it as easy as possible to basically, we don't want to cause more anxiety. We don't want you to be more scared, right? And worried because data, we want to make it as easy for you to know that we've got you covered on that front, right? But like you said, it's often secondary, but it's so difficult to fix when it goes wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. With is is there any other? I suppose in my view, I feel that data backup and data backup tooling and data backup strategy has typically become more important over the last kind of especially 3 or 4 years in the Salesforce ecosystem. So it's kind of on a naturally growing trajectory as it is already. But is I don't know, in your mind, is there anything more that we need to do? Like it's I know my perspective, but is backup truly table stakes for every Salesforce using company out there?
I it can be. There's different solutions out there, right? So yeah, I definitely would say everyone should have a backup. That's my take on this, because again, we're human, we make errors, right? Even if you try and test everything, every possible situation in your low environment, your production is a live creature basically that changes every day, every second. Like, you can't prepare and every change for it. So having a good backup in place, definitely, I think everyone needs it. And the nice thing is, I think that mm, everyone out there, all the folks out there, are starting to also realize how important it is to have a good restore plan in place. And what I mean by this is, like, testing the recovery process and how easy it is to do. Again, we talked how your backup is only as good as your restore. And this is what's helping folks right now to figure out what they need, is because I think in the past they might have looked at, like, okay, I just need to save some data. I need some general solution. I have a backup for all of my other things. Salesforce is just like everything else, right? But we know it's not. Like, in the Salesforce ecosystem, we understand it very well because of how complex the metadata is, and how broad it can reach, and the all the managed packages and all of the custom objects and everything, right? So you need a solution that can handle all of this, because without good metadata restoration, you can't force data into it, right? If a field doesn't exist, if an object is missing, if a relationship is missing, the data has nowhere to go. So I think it's starting to become a bit table stakes in the sense that like everyone's realizing they need it. And that's what kind of pushes that almost that tick box exercise kind of mindset. But we're trying really hard to like show customers that it's more than this, that they, to really get value from it. We'd always recommend testing restore regularly because you will only need to restore when something wrong happens. And that means that usually you'll have someone, I don't want to say screaming, probably not screaming, but they might be like, like, please help me, right? Or like, oh my gosh, we need this right now. And that causes a lot of anxiety, and, I know it might not be like, a lion chasing you, but that's what our bodies do, right? When we're under anxiety, in an anxious situation, we feel like we're running for our life. And that means that you forget a lot of things and we panic. And that's why we always say, like, practice that restore every 3 months, if you can, maybe even every month, so that when someone does come to you for help or something big happens, it's muscle memory. You don't have to think, you don't have to engage your brain. You will know what to do. You've run through this process multiple times and you will, get everything back and running quickly without having to look for documentation and, follow these 10 steps to get it done, right? What helps with this, of course, are things like, an easy to navigate UI, things, as similar, familiar environment and things like that. And this is where, like, we at Gearset, we have backup on the same platform as our compare and deploy and, our pipelines and all of our other solutions, because that's where you live every day. So we're like, at least you don't have to keep context switching if someone needs you to, right? Restore something for them.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. And yeah, you mentioned that fight or flight mechanism. Like it's very, very real for sure. For sure. That's great advice because how often do you don't, it feels like very like counterintuitive to practice things going wrong, But then when we think about it, firefighters train for firefighting situations, you hope
Exactly.
that things don't go wrong. It's as much about prevention as it is about being well equipped to handle when things go wrong. I think as humans generally, we don't like to think there's a great line in the film The Big Short, and that was about the 2008 financial crash. And they talk in that movie, they talk about an investment strategy where people don't like the idea of things going wrong, so they they underestimate the likelihood of those things going wrong, and that was their investment strategy. They 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 bet they bet they bet big on those things because when they lost, they'd lose small, but when they won big. So that's kind of how I think about backup. That's still kind of like a weird place my mind went to
No,
there, but
it's very good. Also, great movie. But yeah, I 100% agree. I think this is where, and I think I mentioned at the beginning, is this is where you see the difference between the customers. If someone has experienced a data loss in the past, they know that it's worth having a backup solution, even if you will not necessarily need it for like years at a time, right? Because when you need it, it will repay you like 100-fold, right? It will save you time, it will save your business money, it's everything, right? It's a bit harder sometimes for folks to see it if they've never experienced anything massive. But then I like we did, we do the Salesforce DevOps survey, right? State of Salesforce DevOps.
yeah.
And oh gosh, I should have written somewhere the numbers so I remember them. But we asked how often people experience a data loss in the last year, and I think it's something like 65% or something, which is a lot. But there was a percentage of people as well who couldn't tell if they've experienced one or not. And it was definitely more than you would like. And I think this is what's important. Just because you think you haven't experienced a data loss, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. You just didn't see it. Your users didn't come across it, or they did, and they thought it was small enough that they didn't tell you, right? They didn't have the time to report it to you, or it wasn't too much of a problem to tell you, but it happened. And a good backup solution not only will protect you from it, it will make you more aware and help you understand your org better. Yeah.
Yeah. And is backup like everybody's responsibility, or a specific team's responsibility? I think there's maybe a misconception that I'm just a Salesforce admin or I'm just a Salesforce developer. I hate that word. But it doesn't really apply to me. That's our platform owner's job, or that's our IT team's job to look after all of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, technically, yes, that's sometimes where the budget sits, right? I've heard from some teams, they're like, oh, the budget sits with my IT team. But my question back would be like, well, but if something breaks, who will they come to? Will they go to the IT manager, or will they come to you, who uses Salesforce daily, who understands it, to fix it, right? If the answer is they'll come to you, I'll say, I think you should care about it. I think you should at least familiarize yourself with it. Because, if that person isn't available, or they're struggling, or they don't know what they're doing with Salesforce, again, they'll come to you. And the more you know what you're doing, the better it is for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Aga, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom on this topic. Such an important conversation for a multitude of reasons, which we've discussed today on this episode. Is there any kind of like last parting message or advice that you would like to give to the listeners around any of the things that we've already talked about, or something different?
Um, yeah, I mean, oh gosh, I should have prepared for this. Um, I think just like think of your data. Like even if it's not something you think on a daily basis, like pause, find some moment to pause maybe this week and think of your data. Like, do you have a backup? Like, is there too much of it in your org? Like, do you know what you would do if something went wrong? And would you even know if something went wrong in your org? I think ask yourself this question. And if the answer to any of these is like, no, I'm not sure, and just like talk to your team and figure out what you could do around this and come to us to Gearset, we can help you. But yeah, just think about it. Like it's so important, and it will, a backup solution will just make your life easier. No matter the role, it will make your life easier. Um, but yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. Other than that, yeah, watch Big Short. It's a great movie.
It is a great movie. It's one of my comfort movies that I can just put on anytime and enjoy it for sure. Again, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom and your knowledge, and sharing it with the listeners of this podcast. I really appreciate it, and listeners, I hope you've appreciated it too. And if you have any questions about any of this stuff, I'm going to send them your way. Just reach out to you on
Of
LinkedIn,
course.
or say, hey, can I speak to Aga on our web chat or something? And I'm sure you'll be happy to help.
100%. Thank you so much for having me. But yes, always available. We love speaking to our customers, potential customers, anyone really, all, like I said, we want to ask why, and would love to chat to you about it. Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. Folks, thanks for tuning into this episode of DevOps Diaries. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe on whichever platform you happen to be listening on. And I will catch you again on an episode sometime soon. Thank you very much, Aga.
Thank you so much, Jack.